The thing I think that a lot of people need to remember in the short-term space is that you live and die by your ratings. If you are running a terrible business, if you don't have systems in place, if you are not customer or guest focused, you're going to be out of the game very early on. Your ratings will suffer, and folks look at those ratings to see where it is that they want to stay.
Welcome to Courageous Stewards, the podcast where legacy meets leadership.
We believe stewardship isn't just about managing resources. It's about multiplying impact, honoring purpose, and building with eternity in mind. Each week, we dive into business-focused discussions on real estate investing on a foundation of faith and family.
We have a desire to inspire listeners with a heart to reclaim their time, talents, and treasures for something greater. Whether you're growing your portfolio, leading a business, or a family, we need to become the best version of ourselves.
This is your space to gain wisdom, walk in courage, and steward what matters most.
Let's build what lasts. Let's lead with love.
Let's become courageous stewards.
All right, welcome back, listeners, to another episode of Courageous Stewards Podcast, where we believe the Lord owns everything and we're called to steward well with what we're given. We're going to dive in today to something that's kind of glamorized on the internet. You'll see it on Instagram and the social medias where your short-term rentals, your Airbnbs, things like that, they look incredible, they look awesome, and everybody gets excited when they're seeing those images of these properties and the thought of being able to own one and what that might look like. But today we're here to dig into the fact that the reality of those and what you see behind the scenes is a lot more involved, a lot more heavy, and can oftentimes be a lot more stressful than what you're seeing when they glamorize this particular space. So we're going to dive into talking about short-term rentals, the reality of them, how to navigate them, and some of the struggles that come with owning short-term properties.
Yeah, short-term properties are something that are very glamorized, I think, in today's society. In the industry that we're in, people look at short-term as very high cash flow. And so for that reason, they want to jump into that space, not really understanding that it's so much different than the long-term space or commercial or some of the other avenues that a lot of investors start out in. Those spaces tend to be a lot more hands-off, sort of. Once you have systems in place for those, you're not near as involved on the day-to-day. And the short-term space is so much different than that. You are a hospitality business, and you better understand that going in, because right off the bat, you live and die by your 5-star ratings. And if you don't handle things well, people are going to be very quick to point it out publicly on the platforms that you're listed on, and therefore you won't last very long.
Yeah.
So it's really, really important that you look at this not just as a hobby or a side hustle, but this is a business and it's run a certain and very specific way if you want to be successful in it. So let's dive in and talk about the real estate STR game a little bit. And what does it look like and what are the realities once you own one? Can you talk a little bit about what you thought short-term rental might look like and then what it became after you jumped into it a little bit?
Yeah, I think on the outside looking in, it can oftentimes look like a hotel, like you said, a personal hotel, a cash cow. Or just like when you think about getting a nightly rate instead of a monthly rent check, the numbers can be substantially higher on a month-by-month basis. And so on the outside looking in, it's like, yep, I want to be involved in that. But then when you actually own one and you realize the gravity that comes with it, because like you were saying, you can set and forget a long-term rental almost. Once you get a person in there, you've got good processes, the rent just comes in.
Yeah, aside from the occasional maintenance thing that may come up or an occasional question that the tenant might reach out to you once every quarter about, aside from that, you really don't do too much or hear too much from them.
Yeah, typically you don't, because they oftentimes don't want to tell you anything, even if there is a problem, but that's another topic. But as far as the short terms go, I think you have to recognize that it is not that way at all. It is very much an immediate response kind of thing. These are your guests. It is like a hotel, and it has to be treated as such because they are there for a good experience, a good time. They don't want to have any issues. The whole goal is that they're happy, they enjoy their stay, and they don't notice anything.
Right.
They just have a good time, and same for us as the host. We want them to be there and to have things set up enough in place that it goes smooth enough that they don't even have a question or a concern, right? Even so, all the way down to your automated responses. There's a lot of information to communicate to a guest on an Airbnb before they ever get there. And so those are some of the things you just don't think about. And then if you get a text, even if it's non-emergency, you better make a presence. My goal is always to show up.
Yeah.
I'm at least going to come there, look at it, let them know I'm going to be on top of this and we're going to get it addressed, even if it's a non-emergency.
Yeah. I think the thing that people need to think about from the start is that you're being compared to a hotel. And hotels typically are much bigger, much better systems in place. They have things dialed in. So if you're being compared to, or the expectation even to be greater than a hotel, how much more do you have to be paying attention to your short-term rental than even a hotel is?
Yeah.
Because they have options. People are either going to go to a hotel or they're going to stay at an Airbnb or VRBO, or, we have our listings on several other platforms, but ultimately they are looking for a better experience than they would have at a nice hotel. And if you're not providing that for them, then you're going to hear about it and you're not going to last real long. So some things to think about. What's the first filter you use to eliminate 90% of bad STR deals before you ever run the numbers on them?
Easy. Location.
Oh man, I wrote that one down 3 times.
Yeah, it's location. There's nothing else. It doesn't make any sense to go invest in a short-term rental somewhere that's saturated or is just not going to make sense. There's nothing around that people would come to. And I think listeners need to know that the property that you buy for a short-term rental does not have to be touristy.
Right.
I find that very interesting because I own one right here in our hometown. It's a small town, but we do have a college, we do have a hospital, and there's a lot of people here. We have some attractions nearby in our small town, and employment's good. So there has been demand for even a Airbnb in a small town.
Yeah.
But you have to look at that. And then what differentiates you from the other? Because we can dive into saturation. So when you're looking at location, how many are already there? And then what size are they? And what are their price points? Because if I can come to the market with a bigger Airbnb at a lower price point, even if there are a bunch of them that are operating at a higher cost, you're going to have some demand for yours. So it's just location for sure is number one. That makes or break any Airbnb deal I'm going to look at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that got called into question very early on when we first started toying with the idea of the short-term rental space, because I had been in the long-term rental space for quite a few years already at that point. And we decided, we need something that has a little bit better cash flow, something that's a little bit diverse within the space, but different enough that we can create an additional source of revenue, I guess, and what it would maybe look like to bring a short-term rental online. And every single person that I talked to before we launched our first one questioned, why here?
I still get
why
that.
This area? Do you really think it's going to work? How many people are actually going to come rent with you in a small town like this? And it really concerned us initially. We're thinking maybe this was a bad idea. We've already poured tens of thousands of dollars into a renovation and, getting ready to launch this, put new furniture in, got all the systems prepped and ready and all that. And we're thinking, gosh, I really hope this works. We thought going in, okay, this is going to take 3 to 6 months to start to see some activity. And we got our first booking within 24 hours.
Yeah.
And then another one, and then another one. And it just kind of solidified the theory that we had that just because this is a small town, there are, to your point, a lot of opportunities because there are different attractions bringing people in that aren't necessarily attractions like vacation attractions that you think of.
Yeah.
But the college is right up the road. Mm-hmm. We've got 2 hospitals. We've got a lot of industry. There's a General Motors plant nearby. We're planted directly in between 2 other more primary markets, and we're on a main thoroughfare that connects those 2. Yep. And we're almost smack dab in the middle of that. So there's a lot of things to think about that are not just, I need to be downtown in one of the biggest cities in the country where people are coming for a vacation and that's where I need to buy at. No, that's not necessarily true. There's a lot of value in some of these tertiary markets that people don't really think about, and they probably should, because it works.
Yeah.
It does work.
The Airbnbs are not just a hotel for somebody traveling for vacation. We get a lot of our demand comes from people that are traveling for work.
Yes, most
people
of
that are
them.
coming into town, and those are great. Those are 2-week stays, and it's exactly what they're looking for. Is they don't want to stay in a hotel for 2 weeks for work. They want to be in more of a homestead, something with a kitchen, some more room to spread out, and not necessarily a hotel room. So the demand is there if the location is good.
Yeah, something that I always have looked at is when I'm looking for an Airbnb opportunity, I try to consider, is there a plan B? So if this particular property is, maybe you think it's going to work great as an Airbnb, and I should say short-term rental, because Airbnb is a specific online platform.
Sure.
But short-term rental is kind of a more broad term that is just stating we have a rental that people rent around 7 days or less on average, give or take. Now, we do book the units for much longer than that at a time, but generally you're going to be about 7 days, 7 to 10 days or under is going to be your short-term parameters, I guess I would say. So the thing I think people should think about, along with the possibility of a short-term rental, is that you have a plan B in case this short-term rental is just not working out for you. What do you do with the property then? Is it resellable at the price point that you at least purchased it at? Because a lot of people get into this space and they think, well, I'm going to make 2 to 3x what I would on a long-term rental. So therefore, I can buy a property that's way overpriced that it doesn't matter necessarily because I'm going to make that in cash flow to pay the bills and make some extra. That's not always the case. Mm-hmm. I would caution people to buy something that is still priced right. Mm-hmm. So therefore, if this doesn't work out, you do still have the option of turning around and selling it relatively quickly to pull out.
Yeah, the laws of real estate investing don't change. You make your money when you buy.
Yes.
And that's important to protect that.
Right. So another thing that you can consider is, would this work as a long-term rental?
Yeah.
If you decide that a short-term rental, maybe you get into it and you're like, this is way too labor intensive. I don't enjoy communicating with tenants on a regular basis. I don't like hospitality. I just want to plug somebody in there long term and collect a rent check every month with much less involvement. Is this a property that could work for that?
Yeah.
There are a lot of folks that go a whole different direction. They want the whole extreme experience, and that's fine. It works for a lot of people. But in my experience, the thing that's worked best for me is to find property that could be either or.
Yeah. So what you call plan B, I call exit strategies.
Okay.
So when we go into a property or an investment, we're looking at it like, okay, if we do go into this and it does go sideways or it doesn't work out, what can we do? An exit strategy doesn't necessarily mean you walk away from the deal or the property after a while. You sell off and just give up on it. An exit strategy for us is a pivot. It just simply says like, okay, we're going to try this. This doesn't work like you were saying. Maybe we're going to pivot to a long term. Maybe we'll just, if we have to, and the last exit strategy we want to do is to sell it off. Is it going to put money back in our pocket? Are we breaking even? Are we putting ourselves in a position where we're upside down? Mm-hmm. So we always run that against any deal we're going to invest in.
So let's talk about the buying and the funding portion of a short-term rental. Can you walk us through, actually I can walk us through my first STR and what it looked like, what I did right, what I did wrong, and a few other things. Maybe you can jump in. Our first short-term rental was actually a quadplex. So we had all 4 of these units rented long-term. One of them vacated, and we thought, you know what? I think now is a good time to maybe jump into the short-term space. And believe it or not, I had some assets that I was able to sell and make about, $15,000 to $18,000, give or take. And that's the money that we used to furnish and prep and set up the short-term rental of this one unit, not knowing whether it was going to work or not. It was a gamble because we just didn't have any experience in the space. After we got going and realized that it worked and there was more cash available in the short-term space, and we didn't mind the hospitality thing so much, we decided to kind of not go all in because we still have a broad spectrum of short terms, long terms, storage. We're in a lot of different things, but the short term is really a nice opportunity for cash flow. I think really, as long as you enjoy and understand the hospitality space and your desire is to achieve excellence with every single guest, and you're in the right area, location is everything, I don't think you can really go wrong with this. So that was kind of our first approach into the short-term space. We actually then did another one in that same quad. So now we have 2 that are short-term and then 2 that are long-term. My idea with this from the start was to recreate that same system elsewhere. And I haven't done it yet, and maybe I will in the future, I don't know. But originally my idea was 3 long-term units and 1 short-term. So the 3 long-term units would then pay for the mortgage, the expenses, the utilities, all that stuff. The short-term was our cash flow in the unit. So we had almost no expenses coming out of that short-term rental necessarily because the other 3 were paying all the bills. I then converted that into 2 and 2, so 2 short-term, 2 long-term. The reason I changed that is because we got to a point where I didn't have a mortgage on that property. And so it made it much easier for me to say, well, it doesn't necessarily matter so much if our cash flow kind of goes up and down a little bit more. It doesn't have to be so rigid. I know for sure I'm making this amount of money per month because of my long-term units, so I don't have to be concerned about it. It wasn't so much that. And so now I have 2 there. And then we just recently, within the last year or so, have pushed in maybe a little more than that, maybe close to 2 years, have pushed into some markets outside of Ohio, and we're enjoying that as well. But that's a whole different ballgame that we can talk a little bit about. So do you have anything that you want to talk about there?
Well, when you're looking at buying, so like our first one, going back and looking at it, I learned a lot for one thing, but I think I underestimated the expenses that came with owning it and running it like a hotel. And I think that some of that's the biggest stuff that people might not be aware of when they get into it. But we got this property actually from family because my wife's grandparents had passed away, and it was kind of a hope for them that the home stayed with the family, and nobody's buying it. And so we had talked with the family about maybe buying it and owning it, keeping it in the family, of course, but also connecting it to the business. And that worked out pretty well. We were able to work out a deal and stuff and keep it in the family. And it's been really actually kind of enjoyable, the whole experience, because we got to do it, update it, renovate it, furnish it, and then show the family what it looked like. And everybody's been really happy with seeing it like that and stuff. So, and knowing what we're doing with it speaks volumes to the family. So we're making sure stewardship's always a focus, and so her family loves that. So it's just legacy in an opportunity that presented itself from something unfortunate like losing the grandparents.
Yeah. You mentioned legacy, and that's another thing that we thought about when we got into this space was the opportunity to bring our kids alongside us. You and I talk a lot about the difference between work-life balance and harmony.
Yeah.
I go back to harmony pretty regularly because we want to involve our children in the things that we do. It's a lot more difficult to involve them in the long-term rental units because they're not going to do those things on site necessarily unless you have an apartment complex or something where they can get a little bit more involved in landscaping or mowing or something like that. But for the most part, they're not as involved in the long-term units. The short-term, however, they can be a little bit more involved in some of the details, some of the cleaning, some of the reorganization, decorating of the rooms, and replacement of linens or pillows, or I don't know, just all the things that go into the hospitality game. They can be a little bit more involved, and we can bring them alongside us. So that's always been something that we've really enjoyed in this space. Now, when it comes to scaling STRs or even just managing STRs, there are some recommendations or suggestions that I would tell people to consider, I guess. And those are having a management software or a platform is key in this space. Now, I know when you only have one unit, sometimes there's a lot of those management platforms that you can't get onto until you have multiple units. But for us, the management platform has been a game changer in our space. And Airbnb, if you're only on that platform, they do have a pretty good management platform within the software that you can plug in a lot of the details and kind of make it hands off. But when you're working with multiple channels, multiple units, you really want to have a management platform so that it manages your calendar for you. It communicates with your cleaners automatically. You set those up initially and automate what it is when you want it to go out, whether it's a message to a cleaner when we get a booking, and then a reminder the day prior, and gives them the option to start the cleaning and then finish the cleaning and request payment, and all those things are all built into those platforms. Same is true for the guest. When they book, they get an automated message that we set up at the beginning, which Airbnb does that.
They do.
And that's really nice. But it's nice to have something that also can manage all those communications and the calendars. So we're on Airbnb, Booking.com, VRBO, Google. We have our own booking platform. And all of those can get very confusing if you're the one who's managing your calendar. Every time a booking comes in, I put it on this calendar, another one, and I put it on this calendar. It's just not possible. You have to use some of those efficiencies at this stage in the game. And so those management platforms will handle all of that for you and dump them onto the calendar, block them on all the other platforms so nobody can book those dates because they've already been booked, which is really a nice system that we have found is crucial for the short-term space, both locally and outside of the state. So a couple of other things that are crucial in our opinion are things like digital locks, things that make this business as hands-off for you as possible.
100%.
Because you can get very caught up in the weeds and be very active and at the property a lot if you don't have some of these other systems that are already set up for you. Like we have digital locks that communicate with our management platform. So when somebody books a unit, they get a code that goes active 2 hours prior to their booking and then deactivates an hour after they leave. The last 4 digits of a phone number or something is what's used for their passcode to get in and out. So it's very easy for them to remember. And that automatically just messages out to them and says, hey, this is what your code is. This is when you can access. Hope you enjoy your stay. Something like that. Wi-Fi cameras are another one. You can't have cameras on the inside for obvious reasons, but on the outside of a property, sometimes it's really good to have either a Ring camera or there's a Eufy or Ufy that Amazon has that we like. Those cameras have proven to be crucial for us when it comes to going back and looking at something that may have happened. We've had guests that have trashed our units. And although we can't see the inside, the behavior and the activity continues outside most of the time. And if you can capture some of that and pass it along to the police or pass it on to them and say, look, this is what we caught. We know that it was your doing and we'd like for you to pay for it. Then a lot of times they fess up and say, yeah, you're right. I'll take care of it. Just let me know what the bill is. We've had that happen before. Wi-Fi thermostats is another one that is crucial. And then just the cleaning software, boots on the ground, having those things set in place are so crucial to managing if you're going to scale in the STR game or have things outside of the immediate area that you're in. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, not yet, because I only own one.
Okay. How do you decide whether to keep scaling STRs or pivot into an asset class like storage or commercial?
That is more so, it's like any other investment. So like, I know you and I personally, anyway, we seek opportunity and we seek opportunity that makes the most sense. We're looking for balance between cash flow and equity. So it isn't necessarily that we're all in on short-term rentals, that we're all in on long-terms. We're all in on opportunities that make sense. And so I think that reigns true with any investment.
Yeah, I think the thing that people need to recognize from the start is that there's a certain amount of hands-on required in different asset classes. Although they say real estate is passive, it's not passive on any of those asset classes. And for me, and I can't speak for you necessarily on this, but for me, it's a psychological game. When does it make sense for you to move away from the short-term space and into maybe another asset class? Well, phase of life makes a big difference. And the psychological game behind how much involvement am I going to have in this particular asset class? for me, it's been, I know that I don't have to have as much involvement in an asset class such as storage.
Right.
And so it made a lot more sense for me to dive into, or at least have that as an additional asset within the portfolio, because it's kind of hands off.
Yeah, we're looking for our time and our effort, energy input to the return on the output. So what's coming back. And so it's a matter of managing that, like, is this investment looks great, but it's going to take a lot of time and effort and energy just to get that. Whereas if you're trying to transition into less effort, energy, and time, right? Because like you said, phase of life, then other investments start to make more sense.
So there is a certain amount of psychological impact that short-term rental has, but I do want to go back to the analysis of a property, and you want to touch on this because you actually had to more strictly analyze your property. So why don't you talk a little bit about the analysis of the numbers and what you look at when you're underwriting it?
Yeah, I think in this space, I like to mitigate risk. I'm willing to take it, but I want to mitigate it, and that comes from having an underwriting process in place. And so when it comes to underwriting a short-term rental versus a long-term, they're very, very different. I mean,
oh my gosh, yeah.
We know the long-term rental is primarily if you have a mortgage, your taxes and your insurance, and oftentimes they'll bake a vacancy rate in there for turns. Mm-hmm. Those are your costs.
Capital expense. Maybe
yeah, you're going to have you might have some capital that you're putting back each month on it. So your list of expenses against an underwriting on a long term is very short.
Yeah.
When you start getting into the short term rentals, it's everything. The whole thing changes in regards to underwriting. My case specifically because you have a mortgage. We did not cash this deal. We took out a mortgage on this deal. So that has to be in there just like it would a long-term rental. But on top of that, it's everything else. And so, yes, a nightly rate's great. 160, 200, 250 a night. That's awesome. That's something to get excited about. But when you add your mortgage, your taxes, your insurance, any kind of a capital fund, that's just the beginning. Mm-hmm. Because now you have to look at your occupancy rate in regards to your expected amount of stays on average, because that's going to matter to go against those expenses as far as your income.
It's hard to analyze how many days you're actually going to have booked in comparison to a long-term rental where you just know I'm going to make $900 a month on this unit, and I can pretty much bank on that unless I have a scum tenant who's just not going to pay me.
Right.
But, it's much more difficult to say, well, I anticipate for my area, I'm going to take 13 bookings this month or 7 bookings or whatever.
It's not a fixed thing, and you can't treat it that way. You have to understand it's going to ebb and flow. When you have expenses in regards to your Airbnb, you're going to have great months. You're going to look at your calendar, you go, man, we're booked out pretty well.
Yeah.
But then you're going to have that dry month come, and you're just going to be a little bit like, man, we're shy this month, and we're not. You don't really know what's causing it, but it's just a little shy. But if your expenses are too high, and those low months start to add up, you're going backwards. So you've got to watch your income over your expenses, and because it's like a personal hotel, you're taking care of everything. So when you're underwriting, you now have to include things that you don't typically include on our long terms, like you and I both our tenants pay all the utilities. Yeah. In Airbnb, you're paying all the utility bills. You're paying the lawn care, snow removal, repairs, and then keeping the property nice. That may be power washing, landscaping, things like that's all you. You're buying everything from the guy out who's going to be mowing the grass and having the lawn care done to the toilet paper that's going in the bathroom.
Absolutely.
And those products, those materials, those cleaning supplies, all that stuff adds up. There's things you don't even think about. There's a subscription service for our door, like you talked about our door access.
Yes, right.
That's an online subscription service.
Yep.
Not a big deal, $15. But if you're ignoring these things and they're going to start to add up. So you've really got to have a handle as much as you can on all those costs up front to the best you can. That way, that deal makes sense and making sure you're not overpaying for the property.
Yeah. So when we did ours, let me just lay this out for you, and you can tell me if you did the similar thing. Now, ours are a little bit different because we didn't have debt to service on these properties, meaning we didn't have a loan on them. The properties that we've used as Airbnbs, short-term rentals, I should say. So what we did basically was we calculated every single expense that we're going to have to the best of our knowledge and say that all added up for a month to $1,300. So then based on that, you would calculate my nightly rate is going to be X number, $220 per night. Now, out of that, I'm going to have to pay some commissions to the platform that I'm going through. I will need to pay for a cleaner if you don't have a cleaning fee built in, which I would highly recommend building that into your price and letting the guest. Some people do it, some people don't, and that's totally fine. Everybody can do it differently, but it's just the way we handle it. But basically, you want to calculate how many nights at X rate per night it would take you to get to that $1,300 worth of total expenses.
Yeah.
And then anything beyond that is what you would consider profit. So your goal needs to be at a bare minimum to calculate, I need 10 nights at my current rate to achieve the amount of money I need to pay my expenses.
Yeah, I think
above that, it's great.
Funny you said that. It's about where we're at. I think ours is 9 to 10 days.
Okay.
9 to 10 days
Sounds
covers our
reasonable.
expenses. Yeah.
Yeah. Yours are a little bit higher than mine because of the debt service, but
Correct.
ultimately we've done the same thing. Even our properties that are out of state that we don't owe a mortgage on, we still ran the numbers based on how much we plan to charge per night, how many nights it would be to achieve the amount we needed to pay all the expenses. And then above that, it's gravy.
Yeah.
That's how we've kind of looked at it. Now, a lot of people would go a step deeper than that and say, okay, I want to have a cash on cash return of this, or I want to make sure that my cap rate, so to speak, of 9%, meaning I want to make 9% on the cash that I've invested. We didn't really take it to that extreme.
Right.
We basically just said, what do we have to cover our expenses? And anything above that is profit. And it worked for us to start, and it still works for us now. It's just not as down in the weeds of the exact detail, how much, from a percentage perspective, how much am I actually going to make, because it's so all over the place,
Right.
kind of with the short-term space. This month, you were just telling me you have every single night booked for the entire month of June.
Earlier this month, we had one gap.
Yeah.
And then later on that same month, she had messaged us asking to push out.
Just
and
adjusted
take the
it.
last night. And I said, absolutely, we'll get that switched right away. And
Yep.
then that blocked out the entire month.
You can't really anticipate necessarily whether you're going to have a full booking for the month or not. We have a lot of bookings that come in same day.
Yeah.
We have a
Yeah.
4
The short-term
p.m.
thing
check-in,
is-
right?
Yeah.
And somebody will book us at 5.
Yeah.
You know, after we think, okay, tonight's not going to be booked. Somebody just out of the blue is like, I'm coming into town. I need it for a night or two. It's available. I'm booking it immediately.
Yep, that's been a surprise for us too. I plan ahead.
Yes.
And so when you see people booking last minute, it's been kind of like, whoa, okay. I mean, that's great, but
And that's kind of where that psychological game plays into this. You don't know exactly how things are going to go. You know, there's a lot of questioning whether or not you're going to get a booking. Maybe you look at your calendar and you see, shoot, the next 2 weeks, I don't have any bookings.
Yeah.
Well, just hold tight.
Yeah.
Give it a chance, because more times than not, people are going to see that. It's going to be in front of people and they're going to book it last minute, and you need to be available and ready to send out messages to your cleaners and your maintenance guys and everybody involved.
you have to treat the system the same, because you may have a gap and you're like, I guess my cleaner can go tomorrow or the next day. You better have your cleaner in the day as if there's a check-in, check-out.
Yeah.
Because you've got to be ready for those bookings.
That's where systems come into play.
Yep.
Having a system that you don't deviate from,
Yep.
regardless of what's happening in the current moment, because it changes pretty rapidly
Yep.
in this industry. Yeah, you really, really have to take account for the high level. I mean, you can get really detailed with the expenses, but you want to kind of get all of the expenses wrapped up into one bundle number, and then from there work backwards into figuring out how many nights it's going to take to pay for those expenses.
Yeah.
I guess. Does that
Yeah,
seem right?
I think that's good. And making sure your rate is comparable. Look at surrounding properties, look at other units in your area, making sure your rate's comparable and makes sense to work for your numbers. It's another one of those things where, no, you don't have to beat every number to death and go right down to the cents and percentages, but it still has to make sense. So doing a little research on the front end to make sure you can achieve what you're projecting, You want to be somewhat realistic on setting that up.
Now, there are a couple of websites that you can use to kind of analyze these properties. Some of them are free, I should say, or free up to a certain point, and then they become a paid subscription after you use them so many times. But companies like Price Labs is a great one that you can kind of analyze pricing on where you should be at based on your area for a nightly cost. AirDNA is another one that I've used a few times that kind of gives you some analysis on what the area and the market looks like, kind of what other properties are doing, where you should be at.
Run it through AI.
And that's the third one that I was going to say, because it's going to look at everything, right? I mean, these systems, they are great because they're very focused on the short-term space, whereas AI can get it wrong and they can look at a lot of details and maybe not give you the perfect dynamic that you're looking for. However, it does do a really good job of breaking it down and giving you a pretty good ballpark of what things are.
Especially if you have a good input on it, where you describe your unit, where you're at. I think you'll get, like you said, the ballpark you're looking for.
Yeah. And from there, then you kind of break it down like we talked about from a numbers perspective, whether you think you can make that work or whether you think you can't. Then it really becomes a little bit more about a heart check, I think. At some point you need to determine, is this the direction that I want to go? Once you commit to something like this, it's hard to back out of it, because then people start booking the unit 3 to 6 months in advance, depending on how you set it up. So this is a perfect example of a property that we started as a short-term rental, and we're talking about maybe selling this property. We just took several bookings in September. And so if we sell this property, what do we do with those guests that are expecting us to host them 3 to 6 months from now? And so you want to make sure that you analyze this well, but that you are committed when you begin. It's very active and involved, but it's a long-term play. You have to be willing to stick with it. And you can change your days out that you'll allow somebody to book, whether that's 3 months or 6 months or whatever. You can do that on the platforms, and you can back it off if you chose to say, this isn't right, I don't want to do it. But then you need to be honorable, I guess, and follow through with the people who have booked, if at all possible, and give them a incredible experience while they're at your place, I guess is a good way to put it. So let's talk about management a little bit, which we kind of already have. The thing I think that a lot of people need to remember in the short-term space is that you live and die by your ratings. If you are running a terrible business, if you don't have systems in place, if you are not customer or guest focused, you're going to be out of the game very early on. Your ratings will suffer, and folks look at those ratings to see where it is that they want to stay. We do. Even still, I will go in immediately if we're going somewhere else, and I'll pick 3 or 4 different properties that I think could be good properties that my family would want to stay at and enjoy. And if I see that one of them's ratings are even 0.25% lower than the other ones, I'll choose one of the other ones. Just because I look at, now I will go in and read some of the details, because a lot of those are false, and people make a mountain out of a molehill, and the owners suffer because of something that really didn't have anything to do with them. That wasn't something they could control, and that's unfortunate. So I do have room for grace there, but by and large, the masses are not going to. They're going to look at that number, and they're going to move on to someone that's better.
You got it.
So something that you should definitely focus on. You will find that the cash flow is much better typically in the short-term rental space, but it is a lot more involved. And so you are essentially running a business at that point. It's like anything else. If you have a coffee shop, or you have a little storefront, or I don't know, pick any number of businesses, you have customers that come in and you service those customers, and they pay for their item. And they're often on their way. The same is true about short-term rentals. It is a business, and you have to run it as such.
It's far different than long-term investing as far as like long-term rentals go. With long-term rental, you have a property, you have a place, you put a tenant in, they pay you rent, they live there, they put their stuff in there, and they're responsible for keeping up with their stuff. When you do short-term rental, being as how it is like a hotel, and hospitality is number one, that comes down to inventory management. You can't be running out of stuff. Like I don't go to mine very often, because we have cleaning people that go in, they handle that part, and they're going in. I've got to make sure they've got what they need to get their part done. So it has to be a well-oiled machine, and those are definitely differences around the long-term rentals. Like, I've got to make sure everything's stocked. It's not something I've ever had to deal with before.
Right.
It's got to be stocked, smooth, and clean. That way your guest experience is top-notch.
Now, on the local side, it's a little bit more simplistic to restock in between guest stays.
Yeah.
You're going to have a cleaner who's going to notify you, hey, you're getting low on this or that or whatever.
Yep.
And it's a lot easier when you're local because you can run to
the store,
Walmart or wherever and grab what you need.
What about your property down in Kentucky?
Exactly. And that's been a whole new dynamic that I've had to kind of figure out, though. How do you work through those same nuances? The situations don't change. It's really how you handle them that changes. And you have got to put yourself in a position where you have solid folks around you. If you try to run a business of this caliber from a distance without any support or boots on the ground, good luck.
Yeah.
I do not want to be in your position. It's been very challenging for us in certain areas, and we felt like we had a system already in place that worked very well.
Yeah.
A lot of the biggest challenges are finding folks who are hyper dependable, that they're going to show up, they're going to keep their word, they're going to do what they say and do it to the best of their ability. Our cleaners, we've had phenomenal success with our cleaners as of recently, but we went through several cleaners that just didn't do a great job.
Yeah.
They didn't show up when they said they were going to. It took them far longer to do something, and it was subpar service. And then they would just quit out of nowhere. And it's like, how am I supposed to run a business successfully when I have a cleaner who decides they want to clean today and don't want to clean tomorrow? And like, it's been a kind of, we've gone through a couple of situations like that where it's almost been panic mode in the moment where you're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? This property is 6 hours from here. I can't drive over there and clean it myself. And so we have learned to have backups for the backups. That's worked really well for us. And to really cultivate those relationships with folks. If you can go and meet the people, talk with them, give them a heart for what you're doing and get their heart and make sure the two are connected. And then really appreciate your people that are there, because they will feel very unappreciated very quickly if you're not going out of your way to honor their efforts, maybe to give them additional gifts on occasion, to support them in some difficulties that they may be dealing with. Like, this is still a people business. And so it goes further than just the guest that you have staying in your property. Some of those additional profits that you make on a property may need to be poured back into the people that are serving you.
We've given gift or a tip on to some of our people that step up when we need it, So we've had early check-ins. And that's a quick text. That's hey, you think you can get this done a couple hours early for an early check-in? And, they're like, well, I'm going to try, and I'll let you know. And then they do, and they come through, and it's like, okay. Yeah. And then they get done, they get wrapped up, and it's like, here's your pay. And she's like, well, there's extra. I was like, there is extra on there because you gave extra today, and I appreciate, it's like letting them know what we value their effort because it helps, and it's just showing that appreciation.
I have a similar example with a maintenance guy that we have who's actually a friend, but he wasn't a friend prior to us beginning this process out of state. And Randy has just been an incredible help. And just the other day, he tends to be a person that goes above and beyond, which is the person that you want and need, that looks for other problems and goes out to fix them, regardless of whether he's benefiting from it at all or not. And recently he went to our property that has a hot tub, not knowing that he was going to have to drain, scrub, refill, and put all of the chemical balance into our hot tub to get it prepared for the next guest. He didn't know he was going to have to do that. He was going there to cut the grass. That was it. And he went out of his way to do that entire process. And we threw him an extra $50 just because it's what we could afford for that particular situation at the time. And we said, we so appreciate the effort that you put in. And his response was, you guys take far better care of me than I do of you. Mind blown. Just because it kind of began to make us recognize that the people that we are working with are impacted by the things that we're able to do, to recognize, like, we want to take care of you beyond the $50 lawn mowing fee that we pay you every week or every couple of weeks or whatever it is. Like, we see you, we know that you're a human, you have a family,
Right.
you're trying to make ends meet, and we can support and encourage that. We love that you are coming to bat for us when we don't know what's going on. We're turning over this property to you with hopes that you'll treat it better than your own property.
Yeah.
And that's hard to find those people that are willing to go above and beyond to that degree. So really look for that. I would also encourage people, some other things that you can do from a long distance perspective is hook yourself up with a platform, an online platform. There are many of them out there, some of them that you could look into. We use HostAway, which has been really great for us. We used Guesty for a while. There's Lodgify, Hospitable, Doorloop. There's a whole bunch of those kind of platforms that you can plug into that'll be like a channel manager for you. Yeah. When you start putting your stuff on all the different platforms, it will manage the calendar, it'll manage the communications with guests, it will manage the lock systems that we talked about where it just automates their new code, it sets it and activates it, and then deactivates it when it's supposed to. Phenomenal. I would highly recommend. I don't even know how you would do a long-term rental without that software. So those are my recommendations. Really get personal and love and care about the boots on the ground that you have, and then get systems in place for as much as you can to systemize it and make it simple for yourself. Otherwise, you're going to struggle with it and probably get frustrated and quit. And even to the degree, like we have done this now out of state, and we talked about doing the same thing in other states, in other areas that we would maybe want to visit in the future. And so now, hey, we have an Airbnb there or short-term rental there, and we can go visit there for a couple weeks. And then while we're not visiting there, then somebody else will book it for the time that we're not there, and we can make a little bit of money on it. We have kind of redirected our vision on that and decided it's not really for us. And we have great support in another state that we already have B&Bs in, and we still have decided it's probably just going to be a lot more work than we're interested in taking on. We would rather just look on short-term rental site for the 2 weeks that we want to be gone there and just book something and not have the hassle and the headache for the other 350 days of the year that we're not going to be in that location, if that makes sense. Now, that's not to discourage people from doing it. There's a lot of that. A lot of people out there who have the same mindset. It's like, yeah, I would really love to have 2 or 3 short-term rentals where I can go visit them and stay in the short-term rental. Ideally, it sounds better than practically it is, I think, in most applications. But if you think you can pull it off, put some of these steps into place, and hopefully, they work in your favor and you're able to do it. Yeah. So what do you think the future of the STR and what the STR world is? Like, do you see the future as continuing to elevate and increase, or do you think it's kind of a thing of the past and we're going to go a different way as a society?
I will say 2 things. The Airbnbs and the short-term rental space, I think there's still room for. I think you have to be more careful going into it in regards to your market, where you're at, saturation, things like that. Because anytime a trend takes off, it's very quick to become saturated. And then you go in and try it late and come to the game, and then it's very hard to compete in that space. But I do see, if you take your time, research your market, find some of those, maybe those niche markets that haven't been hit so hard yet, there's still demand, there's still profitability, and there's still margins left. And the other thing is I do see it changing in a sense also, where there will still be market for that, but I know that there's room splitting, I think room renting, where they're now renting out each room as its own space. That seems to be picking up steam because
Pad split, I think, is the name.
That might be it.
The biggest player in that space. Yeah.
That's another avenue or a pivot in this space that I think is going to also take off. But I do still see demand in the Airbnb space. It just depends on your market. Regulations
in different areas have gotten a lot more extreme, and that's a challenge that you'll want to look into when you're trying to decide where it is that you want to place a B&B. If it's locally, get with your local municipalities and government officials and find out what are the details behind having a short-term rental in this space. You don't want to take these huge leaps of faith and put a bunch of money into something that is not going to be allowed in your area. So just get a feel for your specific area that you're talking about putting a short-term rental in, and make sure that it's going to be allowable, that there's not a bunch of regulations and hoops that you have to jump through in order to do it. Or if there are, that you're doing it the proper way. It's not bad necessarily that they have regulations in place that people can follow. The challenge almost comes more so when there are no regulations and then a government comes in after the fact and decides, well, we need to regulate a lot of this stuff. Well, I'm already in the space. I don't want to have to regulate now based on what you decide I should do. So sometimes it's not a bad thing to be in an area that already has parameters around what short-term rental looks like. And so the one question that I want to ask is, to kind of close this up, is just if you had to give somebody like a first step, they want to start a short-term rental this year, and they need first step. What exact first step would you tell them to start with?
Read, study.
Okay.
I would get educated in this space. I mean, I'm not saying you have to become an expert and have everything figured out 100%, but I would read some books. I would watch some podcasts. There's all kinds of information out there. Get educated. If you like the thought of the short-term rental space, the Airbnb space, then go for it, entertain it, but learn about it first.
Yeah.
I'm big on getting educated first, because you can do anything you want. You really can if you go and learn it and then apply it. You have to go get the headaches that people have already been through 1,000 times, learn from them, because it's going to make your experience so much better. And the whole goal of getting into this kind of space is to stay the course and be in it and continue to grow it and scale it. So yeah, I would say get educated before you do your first one.
There's so much information out there with regard to short-term rentals, especially now because it's been in production.
Yeah, it's mainstream.
I would say,
it's very, very
long
familiar
time.
now. Yeah.
Right. So there's so much information. We couldn't possibly hit all of the key points and stuff. And so we encourage you to go find and study as much as you can about the space before you jump in to it. But I would piggyback on that by saying, create a game plan. Like, where do you want to be at? What do you want to service? Do you want to be a small unit? Do you want to have a massive property? You know, what level, what tier of quality of stay do you want? Is it an experiential stay? Is it like a 1 or 2 night, I just need a place to lay my head kind of space? Like, what is it that you're trying to capture here? For us and ours, we have themes at each one of our properties. And so for that reason, people show interest in a specific property, maybe more so than another one, because they are drawn to that specific theme that we have. We live in an area here where there's a lot of rich history that goes back for hundreds of years. And so we created a property that speaks to the history of this immediate area with Indians and settlers. And, you know, there was a fort here 200 plus years ago. And so we've kind of leaned into that. We have another one that's aviation themed. And so, you know, it really depends like what direction you want to go with it. So I would say figure out a game plan, what it is that your heart's telling you to, what level, I guess, your heart's telling you to jump into this, and kind of what direction you want to take it. Location, your operations, and your funds. Those are the 3 big ones that you're going to want to dive into and do a lot of research on. How is this going to be funded? What is the best location, whether it's locally? I would always advise personally for somebody to start on the local level if at all possible, because it simplifies the game a little bit. But that's not to say that it wouldn't work elsewhere. I know of other people who started long term and they just had to figure out the challenges from the start. And for that reason, they were able to figure them out. And now it's easy, you know, to be managing these from a distance. Yeah. That seems a little more challenging even now that I have both. I wouldn't necessarily want to go the long distance route. The local route is far more simplistic in my case. Not everybody's the same. And then operations. We've talked extensively about all the different things that you can put in place for operations so that you manage this efficiently, effectively, and it's not taking up all of your time, because it very well can if you let it. You really want to put some things in place that allow you to kind of step back and look at the operations and kind of move the chess pieces rather than have your hands in every single thing that's happening because you don't have any efficiencies set up. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before we close this one out?
No, I think that was a lot of good information.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Hopefully this spoke to you and resonated with you. If you are thinking about a short-term rental, I would highly encourage it. I think it's a great opportunity for a lot of people, but your heart has to be in it because it's a certain kind of a beast, so to speak, you know, and you don't want to dive into something that your heart's just not in, because you're not going to service your customers well. So think about that. Consider all the things that we've talked about. We look forward to bringing you guys value. We hope you took something from this. We're honored that you listened to us when you could go listen to anybody, and privileged that we have the opportunity to bring you new information every week. We look forward to giving you future stuff, and we hope you'll come back to listen. So until then, we love you guys. We'll see you later. Thanks for joining us today on Courageous Stewards, where legacy meets leadership and faith fuels the journey.
If this episode stirred something in you, share it with someone who's ready to step boldly into their calling. Subscribe, leave a review, and stay connected as we continue to explore what it means to lead with conviction, serve with excellence, and build with eternity in mind.
So until next time, keep showing up, keep stewarding well, and remember, courage isn't the absence of fear, it's obedience in motion.